turn up when they do. So, good morning everyone, thank you for coming along. Can you hear me all right at the back? We don't have microphones or anything, so, yep, awesome. So yeah, thanks for coming along. Today we're going to talk a bit about hackathons. We've all, I think, done slightly different hackathons, and the aim is really to give you all some of our shared knowledge and wisdom, and hopefully, if you're thinking about running your own hackathon, to help you escape some of the pitfalls there before you get to them. Just before I start in, I've got a couple of questions. So, has anyone run their own hackathon so far in here? Awesome. And has anyone participated in a hackathon, whether it's been yours or someone else's? Okay, cool. So we've got people doing hackathons already. So yeah, you will maybe know some of this already then, but I hope that we can still enlighten you a bit more. So our panel is myself, Dave Patten, and Bill Weinstein. We can do some fuller introductions. I'll introduce themselves. But what we're going to try and do is make this more of a discussion session than just us talking, because you probably all have questions you want to ask rather than us just telling you what we've done. But we are going to do a bit of that. So first we'll do some welcome introductions, which is this bit. Then we'll each talk a bit about our hackathons, how we run them, and what we've learned from that. And then really the final half of the session is open for you to ask us questions. Broadly speaking, we'd like to address these 4 topics. So how to prepare for your hackathon, what to do during the hackathon and how to make it run smoothly, what to do afterwards, and then everything else, all those little bits of logistics that you need to make the hackathon work. So that's us. Me.
Oh, okay, morning everyone, I'm Dave Patten, I'm head of the Media at the Science Museum in London. And we've run a couple of hackathons over the last year through our Digital Lab initiative. For those of you it's been one of those days, isn't it? For those of you who don't know, this is the Science Museum. Digital Lab was an initiative we set up as part of a new digital strategy a couple of years ago, and it's a place for us to do a lot of the more experimental work. We've always done quite a lot of that. There's a way to do it in one place and to be able to talk about it as a single body of work. And it's really, we're looking at how museums can fulfill their mission on the digital age, and exploring new forms of audience experience that are enabled by technology, and we're doing that in all sorts of ways. And one of the ways is through hackathons. So I'm going to talk about 2 hackathons that were quite different in scope and scale. So the first one we set up just over a year ago, and the challenge was, what would you do if the Science Museum and its data were your creative playground for 2 days? And we wanted to reimagine how the museum's collections data might be used to bring new things to visitors. And this was also an opportunity to test whether our collections API actually worked, which is always a good thing to do. So we ran this hackathon just as we launched the public-facing API for the collections data. The format of the hackathon was, we did an open call for participants. It happened in the week, so it happened on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. We had 70 applicants, 62 of those applied within 24 hours of the notice going up, and we just did a general call out and Eventbrite for people to come. We organised people into 10 teams, and some of those teams were self-organised when they joined to come to the hackathon, and some we organised on the first day of the hackathon. As I said, it was over 2 days, but it was only during the day on the first day, so we started at 9 in the morning, and we kicked everybody out from the museum at 6. And on the second day, same thing, 9 in the morning till 6. And the second day was actually a late event in the museum, so the museum was open until 10. And all of the teams got to display the work they'd done over the last 2 days to a general museum audience, or a late audience, which was really, really interesting. So they did all the prototypes, and then they got to see real people play with those and get some real feedback. We did the hack in a large space. We did it in a large exhibition space in the museum, which meant displaying everything on the second evening was really easy. We just opened the doors of the exhibition space up and let the public in. We did it with lots of tech. This really was a tech hack. So it was done in the Science Museum in London. I've got a really big store of technology, of like lots of old equipment and stuff that's about to go into exhibitions. So lots of projectors, computers. We had Microsoft Connect, we had cameras, we we had Google Echoes, so we had lots of things for people to play with. And as I said, the second evening was a show, so it was an opportunity for people to show the things they built to a real audience. So this is the space during the day. We had a number of people from the museum to support the event happening, so to help people get tech running, to get the tech for them. We did quite a lot of videography of the event and a lot of photography, and then we also worked with students from a local university to, again, facilitate some of the activities, so do some of the making for people, and to do a lot of social media outreach as part of this. And people came up with all sorts of different things, from very finished, interesting product to kind of really interesting conceptual products. So there were a number of the teams built games, and this is probably our favourite game on the day, which is something that its heart is really, really simple. So it randomly pulls 4 objects from the museum collection and puts them on a timeline, and then gives you additional objects, and you've got to work out where they fit on that timeline. And if you get it right, you get another object, and if you get it wrong, you lose a life. And you think it'd be really, really easy. It gets really hard really quickly, and people were amazingly competitive about this. We had a couple of teams built chatbots that are using voices recognition to interrogate the collections data and tell stories around the collections data, and that's kind of interesting, and they got those systems working in 2 days. And we had one group, actually an agency came, and they did something that was really, really quite different, and we were really interested in what we might do with this, and we're still sort of talking amongst ourselves and with the agency. They designed something called the Egg, which is a piece of technology that you pick up when you enter the museum and you wear. So it's just like a pendant you wear around your neck, and it tracks you around the space, and it works out how long you spend in each area and how long you spend in front of everything in the museum. And when you leave the museum, you put the Egg back in the docking station, and it prints out a postcard, which is your sort of reminder of your visit to the museum, with the images and some information on the things that the system thinks you are most interested in based on the dwell time. And then it brings things from our reserve collection that you won't have seen that are similar to those things. That kind of allows us to surface some of the 93% of our collections not on display to the public. And the outputs of the day, we encouraged everybody to open source and publish out on GitHub, and about 3/4 of the teams did that. And we wrote a number of blog posts, and we have videos of the event which we shared. So the Digital Lab has its own blog, and we encouraged the participants to write blog posts. The museum staff wrote some, and then we link into the repositories that you can get to the code and play with the code. The second hackathon was quite different. So this was really a remix, and it wasn't a tech-based hackathon at all. And this was to help the museum explore how we might surface the collection in different ways. So not just through a search box, not through the online narratives that we write, but what are the other mechanisms that we might bring some of that rich content to the public. So the format for this was about 50 participants, organised in 7 teams. It was a single day, and it was a low-tech stroke no-tech. So a lot of this was paper-based. It was flowcharting, wireframing. A couple of the groups did build tech demonstrators, but the intent wasn't to build technical things, it was to surface ideas. Much smaller space, and not with access into the main part of the museum, so we didn't expose visitors to any of this, but this is really about helping us spread our thinking around how we might deal with the collection in the future. And the groups looked at all sorts of different things. So a lot of the ways of engaging with the collection were much more playful than ways that we're currently looking at doing that. So there were groups looking at, again, at how do you build games around the collection that surface elements of the collection. Building 3D spaces to reorganise the collection in a different way online. There was quite a few of the groups looked at randomness and serendipity, so how do you kind of replicate that experience of being in the museum when you think you've gone to look at something and you see something else at the corner of your eye and your journey becomes a very different journey. How do we start to build some of that serendipity of experience into a digital experience? And then also looking at mashing up with other data sets. So pulling in stuff from Wikidata to add to the data we have on our collection, and then starting to do things like map the collection out geographically, build timelines, but using some of that information that's in Wikidata as well as the museum collections data. And one of the challenges we have is our collections data is not that clean. So actually matching it with other data sources is quite useful in building these kind of experiences. What are we going to do next? So we've got some hacks planned for next year. One of the things I'm really interested in doing is looking at audio experiences. So not just audio tours, but building much more immersive audio experiences and different ways of using audio to storytell, particularly across two of our sites which have large outdoor spaces and significant historical buildings. And we want to start to bring those buildings to life, but help guide people through those spaces as well. We have, as lots of museums do, lots of little databases sitting all over the place with all sorts of interesting things. So we have war records of railway workers, we have index cards of fairly bizarre collections. And we're interested in what we can do with all of those different pots of data. We don't think we're the best people necessarily to do that, so we'll probably do a hackathon around exposing all of those pots of data and looking at how, again, we might join those in with the collections data in interesting ways. And the last one we want to run is something around AR and really explore the potential of AR for our museums. We're really interested in looking inside objects, looking at the way objects work and how you might do that. But also with those outdoor spaces, looking at how you might repopulate those with people and really bring those back to life in an interesting way. So as I said, we publish on the Digital Lab blogs. It's the address there. So every time we do something like this, we do a whole load of posts around it, and we'll kind of go back and revisit those as the museum kind of picks up some of those work. So it's a kind of good resource to look at. We found the hacks really, really useful, both for us but for the participants as well. The participants were really, really engaged, and we were quite surprised in the first one we ran that people would give up 2 days of midweek work time for nothing to come and work in the museum. We made sure there was loads of swag for people, so we made t-shirts, we had badges, stickers, we had prizes, we fed people loads. We had lots of sweets, and that's a kind of a really big thing, and lots of fizzy drinks, because that's pretty good as well. When the kind of energy levels dip, you just break out another case of Coke and everybody's up and away again. So that's us. And it's over to Bill, I think. I think we're going to dip into it a bit more once we kind of do the discussion session.
Especially the fizzy drink section.
For me.
Yes, for you. For all of us. So I'm Bill Weinstein. I'm the Director of Information and Interpretive Technologies at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And for the last 3 years, we have run a project called the Power of Art Hackathon. The Power of Art Hackathon came out of an endowment that we got from a trustee that was interested in us trying to explore the intersection between art and technology. And so they wanted a public program, and we started. There was a public program, there was a lecture, and then we also had the idea of doing a hackathon. The participation around the hackathon was actually a lot more interesting to see the intersection of art and technology than the lecture. Like these are really not so nice. So the intersection was a little bit better. So we continued on with the hackathon program. We also developed some internal goals. So we were trying to engage an audience. We're trying to turn this around. So the interesting thing is that when you ask your audience to look at your data, to look at your institution, to see the experience that they would make instead of us making experiences and trying to figure out whether or not we got it right. So that was an interesting part we wanted to do. We wanted to demonstrate our willingness to be open and innovative. We had gone through a branding exercise as one of our brand initiatives. We wanted to also be able to begin the idea of how do we share our museum data, just in general, just sort of putting it out there and letting people see what they can make out of it. And it's also, from a digital transformation piece, we wanted to see if this work would actually help change the culture, the internal culture of the institution. So I said we've done it 3 times. So the first year was very traditional. So it was a weekend, 36 hours. We did the similar thing. We did an open call. We had capped it at the room would hold 50 people, so we capped it at 50 people. We wound up with 53. Those 53 people coalesced into 13 teams. Many of the people who come, we had one team that showed up, sort of on their own. Many of the people who came did that sort of speed dating thing as they came and moved them around. We never assigned people to teams, but we did a lot of help towards the end of the night to make sure that everybody was on a team. So a lot of people actually embarrassed people a little bit, saying, who doesn't have a team, come on up, and then did a little picking around to make sure that teams actually formed by the end. We came back the next day on Saturday, did a 12-hour session on Saturday where people really socked in on the work that they did, and then they were able to come back on Sunday to have that work finished up. We decided to get a little bit more formal in the subsequent weeks, and the last one that we just did was full 8 weeks with 80 participants. We added a museum membership because a lot of the people who were working over the long periods of time wanted to be able to come to the museum for free, and so we included a museum membership. People paid to join the museum, so we included museum membership in joining. We ran hack labs, so we ran specific places where people could come and actually do the work, so that they at least had 4 times during the course of that 8 weeks, where they could all come together and make sure that they were doing their work. And then we added, we upped the prizes to $2,000 and $500 for People's Choice. And our prompts got a little bit more interesting as we went along. So the first one we really just wanted to see how people would be social in the museum, and it was a very simple prompt. We didn't actually ask people to make anything in particular. We didn't sort of guide it in any meaningful way. We just said, we think the museum is a place for social interactions. Can you do something that would help people do that work? Later, as we got a little bit more creative about what we wanted to do, we started to guide a little bit more. So the second year, we really were interested in gamifying. So we wanted everybody, again, with a general prompt, we wanted what people to make to be a game. And in the last year, we were even a little bit more prescriptive, in that we wanted to make sure that people used all the resources that we gave them from a data perspective and from a technology perspective. And we were interested in seeing whether or not we would get any interesting information from crowdsourcing. And so we wanted to see if people could do something around artificial intelligence. So we wanted the applications that they built to be able to take information from the participants, and then for the application to be able to learn something, so that it got a little better as it went along. Our resources, the ability of what we could give had gotten better as we went along. The first year we had no API, so we built a whole bunch of USB drives with images and data. The data set was given to people in an Excel spreadsheet. We had done a project with internal locations, so we had 350 iBeacons in the museum, where we gave people access in galleries to 280 of those, and created a toolkit for people to be able to use those iBeacons. The second year, as a result of this, we actually created an API for all of our public domain objects on view, so they were able to give a little bit better view into the data sets that we were giving people. We started to use GitHub, so we put our object images available on GitHub. We had done a little bit more work with our iBeacons. We created a Slack channel for communications because we were going over the course of a 5-week period, so we wanted people to be able to ask us questions. We were able to have the teams to be able to talk to each other, so we created that. We digitized the museum's maps so that people could actually have a digitized floor plan so that they'd be able to find their way. And we started to use this program called DevPost, which is a software that helps you organize and run hackathons, so that people could sign up through DevPost, and it gave us a place for people to submit their projects. And then it just grew a little bit more to the next one, so we increased the API. We changed the way that we did our internal positioning to Apple Maps, and we provided access to that. We still had the hackathon-specific Slack channel, and we still use DevPost for the submissions. Staffing. I think one of the things that we learned that we didn't know is that these take an incredible amount of staff to run. So we worked originally because it was a public program. Our public programs division helped us with that. But we had the core project team, which was 8 to 10 people across all departments. Development, because it was an endowed project, so they were helping us also speak to the donors, so to make sure that we were doing something. We had marketing to help us bring people in, and then also sort of talk to about what the projects were, public programs, our department, IIT, interpretation, education. And then at every part of the events, we would also invite extra people to come in. As the projects progress, once the people who are making the work decide what they want to do, they're starved for different kinds of information at different times. So at the beginning, they're sort of starved for all the technical information. How does the Wi-Fi work? And how do I get this? How do I get my data into the data sets they want? And then all of a sudden, they're starved for content people because as they're trying to think about what they want to do, they want to talk to educators. They want to talk to curators. They want to learn a little bit more about the collection so that they can understand the projects that they have and how they fit into the context of that. So we would run these people through the program, and we would invite them to the Hack Labs, or we would invite them to the all-day piece. And then just for oversight, visitor operations helped us with just signing people in, checking people in, sort of keeping track of where people were, and especially when people started to come on alternate nights, the visitor operations staff were the ones that sort of ran interference for them when the guards would tell them that they weren't allowed to be doing the thing that we told them that they were allowed to do in the gallery. Judges. So since we were giving out cash prizes, no PMA staff judge. Since we were staffing those events, we didn't want to make anybody think that we had any preferences or any biases. So we pulled a team for each of these, a team of 5 judges, and we picked people from the technology sector, people from the education sector, and people from the curatorial sector. And so the problem with judges is that you have to give them a parameter to judge. And then you have to get them together and get them to decide relatively quickly because of the compressed time frame of doing judging. So this turned out to be a very interesting part of the project. We've worked a lot harder on that to get the judges together. The best thing that I could say about that is that make sure that you know exactly what you want the judges to judge on. Because if you give them any latitude, they'll talk for hours about which one they like and which one they don't like. We did judging for the first round. The first day we did, everybody in the room that we were doing the hackathon, everybody presented to the judges for 5 minutes. We did a round table. Every time we pulled everything down to 5 finalists. And those finalists either presented in the auditorium to the general public, or for the last one we actually had a program, Final Friday program, and so they did their presentations. Each of the 5 finalists was assigned a gallery, and they did their presentations in the gallery with the judges, and also interacted with museum visitors for that evening. So there was museum visitors working on using what they made, and also the judges would come by and give a demonstration in that. So it was a very nice way. It was that one time that we were able to do that, where you really got a very nice interaction with the public as well as the judges. So the winners. So the first year, and what you get is a variety of differently finished products. The first year for 36 hours, you get a lot of very conceptual pieces. We had Curator was a program that basically allowed people to curate their collection, and then they were able to pull those collections together, and then they would offer them as gifts to friends, or they would offer them as gifts to the museum, so that Curator would actually just hold those all together. But the idea is that you would do that either when you come to the museum and you had already made this tour, you would then come with a friend and you would walk through the tour, or a number of people made the tours like for gifts for their parents. Somebody made a tour for their mother's birthday, and so the next time you come to the museum, use this app. And this is the tour that I wanted you to see. The first year that we did this, we had just finished branding, and one of our cash lines was Find the Art in You. So the People's Choice Award winner turned that around and said, "Find you in the art," and that was actually an image recognition package. So that you would take a selfie, and it would find your face. And it worked only on flat art for the 36 hours that they had to build it, but then you'd find your face. You'd find your face in art. As we went forward, we won't go through all of these. The last one we found, Dina, was a personal assistant. So it was image recognition. So you'd be able to go through the galleries, you'd be able to take a picture of the art, and then through that lens, you'd be able to see additional information as you were working through it. And Tailwind sort of lumped people in. They were using the sorting hat pattern from Harry Potter. So they would lump people into a variety by a series of questions. They would lump you into 5 of a certain personality type, and then they would use the collection to give you certain parts of the collection based on that type. So I think in the back of mine, I was a spiritualist. I think I remember I got a type. So From engagement. So part of this was to sort of see if we can engage in the community. So we did surveys for all the participants when we were done. So this is some of the pull quotes that we had from that. We have found a lot of satisfaction. We had a number of people who had gone through all 3 hackathons. We had a number of people who had friends that had gone through some of the first ones, and when they heard that we're doing another one, made sure they were coming. So there was definitely an engagement around the technology community. People were very interested in the fact they didn't know that the museum actually thought of technology at all, and were very interested in finding out that not only were we thinking about it, but we were willing to talk to other people about it. It made people change. We were supposed to be a creative space for play, so it made people really change the idea of what the museum experience would be. Not only the ability to make their own experience, but to understand that we were really thinking about trying to create innovative experiences and inviting our audiences around that. I like the last one, the thought that we were saying, buy high for innovation. I showed that to my bosses on the time. And for us, so we created an API. So we didn't have one. We're now using that API not only for the hackathon. We created a digital publication last year that we could use the API for. We're using it on the website. We're using it to contribute information to Google Art Project, and we're just starting a digital asset management system where the API is going to be the glue between our collections management system and that. And it's helped us expand the internal location system in general, where we started with iBeacons. This, because we continue to use this as part of the hackathon, it continued to make us really think about how we would do that. So we've innovated through iBeacons to Wi-Fi triangulation to Apple Maps, and this project actually keeps that project alive. And then internal collaborators and digital transformation. So this was these projects were the first time we used Slack. A lot of the participants from internally began to use Slack that way. And so we've increased the use of Slack as a communication tool throughout the museum. It's given people the idea that somebody can create something really cool in 36 hours as opposed to the 36 months that it usually takes us to do that something. So it's really changed the idea about how people approach digital projects, and it's sort of pushed forward the idea of design thinking. And we've gotten some requests for people to take the hackathon model out of the digital and thinking about using that for problem solving for other projects. And so for next steps, we would like to think about developing winning projects. We actually, one of the projects last year that did not make the finalist, but the person was very persistent, has actually gotten his stuff together, and that project is actually available in the Apple Store. We worked with one of the second-year winner. We tried to get them funding because they sort of coalesced in that same way. The developer that they had, they were all very interested in doing the project, but the developer actually moved and got a real job. And now for them to continue that, the developer actually wants them to pay them. So we've tried to help them get funding so that they can finish that project. And we've been approached by this past year's winner also to see whether or not we'd be interested in continuing to develop that. And I think for us, we didn't really think of these things as something that we would actually want to see brought to fruition, but I think it's a motivation for people to come back and participate, and it's interesting. It's an interesting perspective for us to see what our relationship remains with those things. Is it just an open data project? Is it just something that we continue to provide resources for, but we don't necessarily brand in any way, or is it more of a collaboration? And so we're sort of working through that. And then next year, because we're in the process of doing a lot of renovation in our building, we don't actually have any of the spaces that we pictured anymore. To do a sit-down hackathon, we're thinking about doing one online only, similar to yours. We're also thinking about how to represent our collection online, because we're doing a website. And so we're thinking that would be the prompt to do that, at least for 2019, to do that all online.
Brilliant. So, I'm Kyriakou. I work for a digital agency called Cogapp, and I'm a senior programmer. So if you haven't come across Cogapp before, we partner with museums to do cool things with online collections, digital archives. A lot of what we're doing at the moment is web-based, but as you'll see from some of these, that's not always the case with what we do. And we run a hackathon. But it's more like a hack day. So in contrast to some of what you've just heard, ours is a little bit more informal. It's an in-house hackathon. It's us in the office and selected external guests. So sometimes that's clients, sometimes it's just fun, interesting people we know. It lasts one day, and we've been doing this since February of last year. So on average, we've done one hackathon every 3 months. Why do we want to do a hackathon? A bunch of different reasons. It's always great working on client projects, and we love our clients, but we wanted to make an explicit space to kind of experiment and innovate, because if we're doing things that we're going to release to the public, that we're doing for our clients, it needs to be robust, it needs to be long-lasting, we need to be sure that we're going to build something that is going to work for everyone. And that doesn't always align with the kind of fun, hot new technologies that, you know, oh, well, is this going to be supported in 12 months? Maybe, maybe not. And we have to make some decisions around that that aren't always in line with that kind of experimenting way of thinking. So the hope was that this wouldn't just be a platform for experimenting, that we could also take some of these ideas, use the hackathon as a kind of rapid prototyping ground, and then find things we want to develop further out of that. We did set some explicit kind of boundaries around what we wanted to do, so early on there was a temptation to work on things that we were already working on, but again, that wasn't really what we wanted out of it, so we kind of implemented a protocol that we had to work on stuff that wasn't our day job. It had to be something new, something different. Maybe then it would circle around afterwards and kind of come back into our day job, but it wasn't an excuse to explore something we were already working on. We did want to make things that worked, even if, you know, they only worked on that day. We wanted to focus on the core of ideas, and you'll see as I go through this, a lot of the ways we developed our sort of small hackathon framework was to encourage being able to make things that actually were a small product demonstration, what have you, and also to have fun. It's, you know, it's always nice to play around, and I think you forget sometimes, especially with technology, it's easy to fall into a rut of doing similar things. So we wanted to have a space to just play around, really, and yeah, there's a lot I think that's come out of that we're excited about some of these ideas. So I mentioned external participants. There's been a range of people from the National Library of Scotland, the National Archives, Art UK, to more kind of technical, so consequential robotics, who brought along their robot dog, which was one of the more surreal hackathons, I think, but it was quite fun, and South Coast Science, who are a local organisation and brought along some pollution environment sensors they were working on. So we had Tristan cycling around Brighton on bike collection pollution data and all of these kind of random things. So how do we do this? Our formats is fairly basic. We have the whole company, which is about 15 of us. We're mostly technical. It starts when you arrive on the Friday, so we did this on the Friday every 3 months, and you just come in, start working. Food is provided, as has already been mentioned, feeding, watering people, very important part of the hackathon. At 4:30, everyone would demo what they had done, and then we'd go and have a drink of fun. In terms of preparation, again, fairly straightforward process. I saw Cohen's tweet yesterday about how, you know, having processes for generating ideas. So this is our idea generation process for hackathons. Every week on Thursday we have cake, because cake, and we use that as an opportunity to start developing ideas. So we have a wall, we had some post-its, so we write down our ideas on post-its and stick them on the wall. You'll see this wall is slightly redacted for privacy reasons. And once we've got the ideas on the wall, each week they are culled. We'll take a look. If there are some that have been there for a while that we don't think we're actually going to develop, those get thrown away. If we think there are interesting ones, then those stay on there. And so gradually that means the ideas, in theory, gets better and better. Then the day before the hackathon, we pick out a handful of those, which is generally between 4 and 6, and form our teams around those ideas. We didn't initially do a lot of sort of testing the ground for these ideas, which did result in some hackathons where we'd start working on something and then realise 2 hours in that actually it wasn't going to work the way we figured. So we have, in addition to coming up with ideas now, started doing a bit more prototyping in advance, just to prove that what we're going to do is feasible, whether it's checking an API will do what we think it does, or playing around with a platform, or what have you. I should probably also make the point that this is a bit different if we have external participants. So obviously this works for us in the office. If we're doing this with an external organisation, generally we've done this through something like Google Docs, so we have a collaborative document which works in the same kind of way as the ideas wall. Everyone can throw in ideas, and then we can have a review of those and see which ones we think will work. So that's how we've run our hackathons. What have we made? We've made some more serious things, some more fun things, I think. So we don't really have winners or losers at our hackathon, but these are a few interesting things I think that we've made. So this was our most awarded Hackaday project because it got one award. This was the portrait face swap. So this is using facial detection to detect faces from a webcam, and then it will overlay an image that's been chopped out of a portrait. You can see John here demonstrating that if he covers his face, once his face reappears, it will randomly pick another portrait. Another image-based one, so Andy, who's hiding back there, is beautifully demonstrating this, which was the mood mirror. So again, using facial detection, but this time to detect moods and emotions. So it will detect the emotion of surprise or fear, I'm not really sure what that is, and then find an appropriate image that mirrors that emotion. Open CCTV Dragon, so this is a slightly more dystopian project. The idea here is that if people are on your site using a zoomable image viewer, it will pick a random selection of those and let you kind of digitally peer over their shoulder and see what people are viewing on your website. Into the maybe slightly less practical, we also had the augmented reality cupboard explorer, so we really wanted to play around with AR. We have a big cupboard in our office that we can never find things in, so we decided the best way to solve that problem would be to make a small iPad app that lets you see what's inside the cupboard without actually having to open the cupboard. You know, who says we over-engineer things? And the robot calligrapher, so Ben Rubenstein loves sponsoring weird things on Kickstarter. One of the things that we got was this drawing robot, so we decided, well, what would happen if we paired this with a calligraphy brush pen. Turns out robots aren't very good at calligraphy, but it was quite fun. If you, I think on the blog post about this, there's a video where we also tried to make it work with watercolor paints, which was quite messy. So yeah, don't do that. So those are some of the things we've done. That's kind of how we've done it. Was it successful? I think arguably yes on most fronts. So it was definitely fun. We've enjoyed it. We've had ideas that I would say they were good. They were certainly fun ideas. Initially, we weren't so great at having ideas for non-technical participants because we're mostly technical. That's a definite bias. And Louise, who's sitting up front here, she's one of our producers. I think your least favourite hackathon, it's fair to say, was making a list of all of the websites on the internet so that we could scrape them and index their CSS. Yeah. But you got about, what, like 80–90% of it? So most of the internet. It definitely worked for using different technologies. We've used a lot of things that we wouldn't have used probably otherwise until they were more robust. So Watson, IBM's text analysis platform, Microsoft for the emotion detection in images, OpenCV for image processing, the Audiveris for doing OCR for sheet music, which was a very interesting one. So that's definitely been a success. And pursuing further development, so at least a couple of these that I can think of off the top of my head have circled around then to come back into projects. So the Watson text term extraction has been integrated into the Baseball Hall of Fame's website for automatic tagging of articles, and sort of interactive image manipulation tool we built is currently being integrated into a project we're doing with the National Archives, which I think you'll see early next year. So not a huge percentage of the things we've done have necessarily been reintegrated, but it has been successful. I think arguably we could probably put some kind of a process in place to make that more effective, because it's really dependent on what we've done now. So if you want more information, I've kind of skimmed over the range of things we've done. There are blog posts for quite a lot of these things. The code for a lot of them we have tried to publish on GitHub where possible. There's videos on our Vimeo page, and there's a lot of videos and images that Gavin's put on our Instagram, which aren't always very flattering. So, so that's the end of the formal presentation element. We're a little bit behind where we were planning to be, but I think that's fine. So we've got about 20 minutes now for questions. These were the broad topics that we put up, but that's not to say this is kind of restrictive for what you can ask. So does anyone have any immediate questions about preparing for a hackathon and getting things up and running?
I think it's mostly for Bill and Dave. Both of you alluded to it a little bit, but in terms of the agreement between the participants and in your institutions about how you may or may not use what they develop, you encourage some of them to post to GitHub, but how do you navigate that relationship? Are there legal? Are you bringing legal people at all at any point, or how does that work in your institutions?
Yeah,
So
I mean,
this. You do.
Yeah, no legal agreements. We encourage people to publish, but the ownership of those ideas is with the people who those.
Is there an expectation that do they think you're going to be using it in any? You know what I mean?
It partly depends who the participants are. So obviously the agency that did the egg were more nervous about giving up their idea, but some of the museum people that came to some of those, so that the game particularly, that was done by some people from the Victorian Albert Museum, the British Museum, and they were really happy for that code just to kind of live on and for anybody to use that.
Yeah. Okay.
So for us, we actually created an intellectual property agreement with our in-house counsel. So the idea is that if we wanted to develop any of the projects, so any of the ideas, sort of it's basically we don't own, we're licensed, we can use them, they could use, everybody can use them, but we want to make sure that we were covered, that if we decided that we liked the idea but didn't like any of how it was actually made, we still have the agency to do it. We actually required people to post code in GitHub. It was part of the judging criteria, so we had technical judges that actually look at the code to do that evaluation, and so that code became part of that. We encouraged people to in the same way we encouraged people to post on the creative comments if they wanted to push it out. Had the same issues. There were some people that were, some participants were commercial, and so they didn't want to, they didn't do a lot of that. And some people, the general people, as long as they understood that we weren't just taking it from them, that they also kept to keep it, it basically worked out okay.
I think, so I can speak maybe a little bit to this as well. Obviously, we're writing a lot of the code, so we don't really have issues with that. But early on, we did do some projects where we used data sets that only we had access to. So from a distribution perspective, one of the things we try to do more and more is use open data sets and things that other people can access. So there aren't then issues around, oh, we've written this code, but sorry, you can't access the data that we've used with it.
Curious about recruiting. I know some of you mentioned just or Bill and Dave about an open call. I'm wondering if there was any sort of targeted recruiting, and then what the makeup of the participants ended up looking like between sort of agency folks, independent folks, and folks that you all may have had relationships with before.
Yeah, so we did both. We put out a call, on our Twitter account and other places, but then we also sent emails to all the local universities. We, as we were recruiting judges, we asked the judges to also, also post it in their communities to see if we can gather that. We wound up with actually an interesting cross section. Very few agency folks. We had 2 of the years we actually had professionals join in and do that. But the majority of the people who came, some of them worked for agencies. Many of them were just individuals. They were coming at the end of their day. They were coming, over the weekend. We had a number of students. We had one year, we had a group of 3 women that were sponsored by the engineering department in their university to participate. Last year we had, so they weren't, what were they doing? Was it their coding? It was their programming class? Yeah, so programming class, but they weren't programmers. They were medical students. So they were taking a programming class, but they came actually, their professor had them join as a team. And that was their project. So what they made was actually their final project. So we've had a variety of different participants.
I think ours was the same. It was, it's one group of agency staff. There were some people from other London museums. We had some people from the Wellcome Trust come, and then we had some graphic designers, just kind of individuals with different skills. And we just did the call through the museum's social media channels and our personal social media channels.
Yeah, so when we did the hackathon, we had mostly individuals who found us through the same channels, but I think next year we're interested in having something similar where like the students complete it as a class project or agencies send groups. Were there any techniques or like ways of communication that you were
So our goal was to get as many people to participate as possible. And so the calls went general. So Philadelphia has Tech Week in April, and these projects have often corresponded with that. So that call, the first year it was our event, Turks Philly Tech Week, and so we put it out in as many places as we possibly could, and tried to get people together. That I remember we never targeted any particular kind of we never targeted agencies, we never targeted universities in that way. We just sort of made sure that everybody knew we were doing it, and it kind of grew quite organically.
I'm sorry.
I guess I was going to, we didn't really do any of that. What we did do quite a lot of before the actual event was to survey the people that were going to come, find out what their kind of skill sets were, and try and form those teams before the event. So we used Slack and a couple of other things to allow people to propose ideas and try and get teams to coalesce around ideas, so that there wasn't too much time spent on that first day putting people that weren't into teams, and that was work well done, time well spent.
I was curious about just ballpark budgeting and just funding structures or whatever, because we're considering doing some of this, but I just want to know realistically, like, what you would have to budget, and if do people have to pay to participate and like get sent there, and what models do you guys use to fund it?
So we pay. So people who participate in ours pay to participate. That's partly because it's a public program model. So we charge for most of our public programs, and so the cost of that was usually the cost of admissions. 1 year it was a little less. Last year was a little bit more because we included a membership. There's an endowment that goes along with this project. So the donor that gave the money gave enough money for an endowment. That endowment generates $25,000 a year, and we use all of that for this project. The majority of that goes to food.
I mean, ours is free. There was no charge for the participants, but the digital lab is partly funded by Samsung. So we had an amount of money from there, and the costs kind of the same. The big cost is food and swag, and then it's museum staff time. We've got to free people up from their day jobs. We budget about £5,000 a time to run these, and most of that cost goes in food and drink, particularly if we need to use our internal catering.
Yes, especially for pizza. But pizza for 80 people gets pretty expensive as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely agree. Our budget is slightly smaller because we have a lot of the facilities already. We're working out of our office, but we definitely, most of our budget as it is spent on food and drink. The cost to us, as Dave sort of mentioned, really is our time, and we've been quite fortunate because our hackathon was something that we all really wanted to do, so there wasn't really any need to sell that. Everyone's one day every 3 months was a good thing to do, but if you are trying to maybe persuade internally that you'd like to do a hackathon and is people's time worth it, anecdotally I would definitely say it's been worth it for us. If nothing else, it's been an incredibly fun thing to do. It's been a great way to try out different things, and I think that's been well worth the time that we've spent on it. So much so that actually one of the things, we had a kind of mini retrospective a few months ago to decide if we wanted to shake up the hackathon format a bit, and one of the things we decided to do was actually make it more frequent. So now, instead of doing them every 3 months, we're going to do them every 2 months.
It is, I know maybe, so we should say that more. So it is probably one of the most fun projects that I've ever participated in since I've worked in the museum, and all the staff that participate in it actually have that same feeling. And I think the reason that ours have grown from the weekend to the multiple times is because people like the work so much, they're actually willing to contribute more of their time and think about it in a broader way. It's the interaction that you have with the people who are doing the work is it's really amazing. And the pitch is pretty good.
Sorry. We had some strange things come up in the before, so probably the most challenging for us is one of the participants emailed and said, "Can I bring my baby?" And we dug around a bit in the museum. We talked to health and safety people and legal people, and they were all reasonably comfortable with that. And then we did just check back with the other participants to make sure they weren't going to find that off-putting. So we had, for the first one, we had a baby in for 2 days. which was come with some great pictures of the baby sitting on the middle of a round table with
Beautiful.
coders sitting around the top. Hacking away. It's quite fun.
Yeah, to that, we didn't have the baby, but we actually had, after the first year, we actually included, we had a code of conduct, but we also actually had people sign releases for pictures, because as the first year we were taking pictures and everything was fine, and then the second year we were taking pictures and everybody got mad. So we produce the intellectual property agreement, we produce a code of conduct so that people understand what they're supposed to do when they're there, and we actually ask people to sign a release for photography to do that.
Is it, especially in your two hackathons, it seems like everybody has to be technical. One of my questions is, were there a lot of people who had no technical skills at all, and would it be valuable maybe to assign on a team someone who's not technical but still is interested in visiting the museum and has great ideas, with someone who can help them implement it?
Yes. So we tried this a couple of different ways, and so a number of the people who came, because we put calls out to so Philadelphia has, I don't know, like 70 universities around there, so we put calls out to all of them. We put calls out to the art schools in particular. So we had a lot of art students came who were not technical, and so we tried to help people as they were pairing up teams to make sure that they understood what people's specialty was. And so we started this a couple of different ways. We landed on, you had a different color dot on whatever you're wearing, and you were either a coder or a designer or a content specialist. And so we tried to make sure that people pair that up, because the problem was, especially last year, we wound up with a couple of teams that came and they didn't get the extra help. So there were coders and designers, and then they came up with some ideas, and then but they couldn't do it because they didn't actually have anybody to contribute content to that work. And so there was a lot of sort of mashing around, and we had some content people who couldn't find coders, and so there was even some work as that work progressed where we sort of put people together and said, so you guys pick, you have two projects. You have a content project that you don't have anybody to code. You have a coding project you don't have any content for. Maybe you can either make a third project or pick one of the others, but you should all get together because you're not going to be able to make anything. So.
Well, that makes, and I guess I'm thinking of like an older person, like me, who may not be technical, who visits the museum, who can give a lot of input in maybe what seniors, what kind of technology would help seniors experience these. But they have no ability to maybe even produce content, but they have an idea that can help in implement.
No, it's right. The biggest problem we had with our marketing department, and still have with our marketing department, is to get them to understand that we're not only looking for technical people for participation, that we want to make a broad call to get people, and like, why would somebody else want to come to do that? But it's exactly that. You have the opportunity to affect how the museum interprets itself. A lot of people come for that.
And yeah, people of all ages. Yeah. Old people?
Yeah, even old people.
Even old people.
Well, they didn't stay as late.
Or have as many I get tired after 6 or 7 at night.
Building on that question, did you have any teams that fought or didn't get on or didn't work out?
Yes.
I
Agree
did.
on something?
So we had one team team of 5 and 3 left really quickly. We had 2 quite strong, challenging individuals, and one of the big lessons that they went completely rogue, and they decided not to hack the museum's data. They decided that very early on the challenge with museums was one of governance, and the museum's boards were not properly formed. And I caught them halfway through the first day about to ring the chair of our trustees and suggest new ways of forming museum boards, and they just have to rein them in. And they were quite challenging the whole way through, and they did continue with this kind of hacking museum process, and particularly museum governance. And we just had to make sure we kept them away from people that would have been problematic for us if they'd have been calling.
Yeah, we never. So in all 3 years, all the teams did. None year did all the teams finish. So there's a lot of people would come back. We were very surprised even from the first Friday how many people came back the next day. So, but that year, 13 teams and 11 projects. The thing that we have that's probably as close to that is in our second year, we had two guys that were coders that were trying to find teams, and they sort of bounced around, and they never actually found a team. And they submitted a project which they told us was a virus. So they decided that really the way to shake up how the museum was going to use its collection is that they actually created a virus that was actually in some ways going to open up the collections to the anyway. So although they submitted that project, we didn't actually, that project never got judged, and we took it down from DevPost. But you know, but there's people come to things. You know, we ran into students that had to run into finals. You know, so they were working really hard. It's hard to get through. You know, it's even in a short period of time to produce something, and you know, so people kind of peel off. We had the same problem where people, you know, some dynamics in the group. You know, I don't like the team that I'm in, but I have this other idea, so people sort of moved around. We try to keep it fluid. We try to get them to identify themselves because we're giving money. So what we don't want to have in our case is a situation where somebody says, you know, this team won, and then somebody stands up and says, well, but I was on that team. So we really make them declare their teams early, and if they're going to make changes, they have to tell us, and so that we can approve it, so that we don't have outcome.
And the other thing we did was do regular callbacks, so we got the teams to regularly present back to the whole group, just so we could check that everybody was kind of on track and had what they needed, and we could kind of intervene quickly if they looked so they were struggling. And that's a kind of good technique, and it kind of keeps people quite competitive as well when they're doing that.
I think we sort of obviously, we all get along quite well because we work with each other all the time, so the personalities...
Not necessarily.
Well, there's only a few of us.
You're being recorded, so that's all you're going to say.
Oh, exactly. Talk to me after. But from a practical perspective, we definitely found there was a sweet spot in terms of team sizes. So single person projects, we've generally found struggled to make something over a day. More than about 4 people always seem to be a few too many people. So again, maybe something would get made, but it was just quite tricky logistically. So that kind of 2 to 4 people over the course of a day seemed to be about the kind of sweet spot for our team sizes. Just going back to the previous point on involving non-technical people, and I think that the idea generation was a very valuable part of that process. And when we've had external participants, the idea generation has been great because it's taking those real problems. So rather than if we're looking at a collection or something like that, us speculatively saying, well, how about we solve this problem? Having someone present us a real problem that needs to be solved is great. So, what am I trying to say? I think being involved in that idea generation process is a really valuable way that if you're not necessarily a coder or someone like that, being able to be involved before the hackathon to help develop actual real world use cases for things is incredibly valuable. And to go back to what we said before on the content side as well, we found that was very useful, being able to have someone to kind of point the way and help us navigate the kind of things that we're doing, and again helps produce something in that day. I think we're running short of time, so I'm just going to open up to any questions. Let's just go wild.
I was just wondering, for the timing, you said you've been running hackathons over several days, but you usually stop in the evening and then continue next morning. Have you been thinking about running them 24 hours? Because that happens quite often.
I mean, it does happen. So I've been to something called Museo Mix, which came out of France, and they ran over 3 days, and people tend to work, 3 solid days and nights. We chose not to do that. Partly it's a logistical problem in the museum. It costs the museum money to keep the museum open for non-staff, and that can make it quite expensive. And it's not easy for people. It's not easy if you're doing that. If people want to leave, it's not easy for them to go in and out once the museum's locked to the public. So for us, it's a pretty logistical thing. I think one of the things we're interested to explore is how participants can join in online and don't necessarily need to be there. So you might have coders that don't need to be in the museum but can still be part of teams. And that does potentially let you work outside of those 10 or 11 hours the museum is open.
Ours is the same logistical problem. So the second and third year, all of that project happened actually off hours. So we would keep the museum open those evenings for people to come. But again, it's almost impossible to have a 24-hour program in the museum that would fit into any, certainly wouldn't fit into our budget. And the same problems of people getting in and out. We had 2 of the years we had people from people remotely trying trying to participate. And we're thinking about that this year to do it sort of all online. We haven't found the hybrid of, some people here and some people not. We haven't found the sweet spot for that, but we're thinking that we might just be able to run one that doesn't require on-site participation at all, and to see if we can keep that going in the online space. You know, to keep them, there's probably 3 of them.
We can send them food. Okay, well, I think if there's no more questions, we can call time there. We're spot on 12:30. So thank you very much for coming. I think we're all I think we're all around for the rest of today. So yeah, if you have more questions, I know there's much more knowledge that hasn't been conveyed. And thank you.
Yeah.
So do you think you're pretty Where are you?
Yes. It's one of those things where you
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, most of the time I say, every once in a while something happens, puts it up, and almost always is. 2 generations older, a generation older than my children. The thing is, my kids are in their 20s now. They don't feel they're a generation older than kids in their 20s.